Hi folks, you're with Tassos today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the increasing number of cases, certainly that I'm seeing, where recent migrants to Australia, illegal or otherwise, are opening up businesses like restaurants, takeout food shops, those sorts of things, and they're then importing under the massive scam that is the skilled migration program in Australia, and I'm sure this is scammed, wickedly and brutally elsewhere around the Western world. They're bringing out so-called skilled migrants to come and work in their business, but really they're just bringing out people to be exploited. Now, the level of exploitation, it depends on your point of view, I guess, but the mandated rate for the senior chef or cook in your restaurant is it's about the average wage, give or take. So the job is supposed to go for, I think, 38 and a half hours a week. This is like the legally mandated time, 38 and a half hours a week, and it's paid again, about the average wage. Now, if you want someone to work beyond that, you have to pay them more, of course, and depending on whether it's a public holiday or a weekend, there's something that's called penalty rates, where instead of, and I'll just round the numbers off here, instead of $1 an hour, you pay them $1.20 an hour. Like it's an extra amount, and that's called a penalty rate for again working on public holidays and the like. So there are cases where the migrant business owner, say they come from India, for example, they come from India, and they say on the skilled migration sponsorship form, they say that they can only hire someone who has a particular cooking expertise in a particular regional Indian cuisine, and so they can't find anyone locally to do that. And so their only option is to import somebody under the skilled migration program because they understand the spices that are used in that region. What bullshit, seriously. But the government, the Western governments now are just pleased that another brown person has come into the country, so they don't care. Yeah, you want to be? Yeah, fine, go ahead. And then they can sponsor the guy's wife to come out as a skilled dishwasher. Seriously, dishwashing is listed as a skill. Then the children can come out, and before you know it, you've got a whole bunch of peasants out here that don't have any skills. But there you go. Now, of course, these people can be easily exploited by the business owner, the migrant business owner, who's got no compunction about exploiting his own people. Now, he may be a much higher class in that Indian caste system. He may be like a Brahmin or something, and these people are from the lower caste. They're nobodies, so they can be exploited because that's how it would be in India. So these people come out, and the business owner looks at this. Look, I've got to pay the average wage to this guy, but if I pay the average wage, my business won't be viable, or I won't make as much money as I want to, or I won't be able to drive as nice a car as I want to, and so on. So what I'll do is I'll pay this person less than half of what I'm supposed to pay them, and I'll work them double the time. So instead of 38 and a half hours a week, I'll work them 7 days a week for 75 hours a week, and I'll pay them about a third, less than a third, the mandated rate for that time. So instead of them making $100, I'll round the numbers here. Instead of them making $100 a week, I'll pay them $30 a week. So anyway, this sort of thing is widespread, and most of these migrant open businesses, whether they buy a franchise, like take out chicken shops or something like that, whether they buy a franchise or they open up a restaurant or they buy a restaurant, it's a massive international scam. They borrow the money from India, and that's done by a big Brahmin sort of money lending scheme. So they open up a front company in Australia that lends the money, but that borrows the money from India. So they get all these international tax offsets and various scams there. if the business looks like it's going to make a profit, they just increase the management fee, which is paid offshore, so no tax is paid locally. And of course, to make the business viable at all, in any sense of the word, they have to pay people below the mandated rate. Now, I've looked at a number of these cases that have come up, and I've noticed that it seems to be that they're paying people about 1/3 of what they're supposed to be paying them, and even less if you include packaged in accommodation and food and so on. Because when they're bringing out certainly bulk people through the labour hire firms, people to work in Chinese and Indian restaurants and that sort of stuff, they may pay them $100 a week as in the total amount, but then they'll take off $50 for accommodation because they'll put them up, 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment in an apartment that the same investment company from India or China owns anyway. So they do a round robin with their investments there. And then they'll give them breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the restaurant, which becomes a tax deduction in effect. But then they deduct that from their wages. So even though they're paid $100 a week, they may only see $25 a week of that, which brings them below the taxation threshold, so they don't pay any income tax. So no one's paying tax anywhere in the whole scheme of things. So it's a massive scam, and I've noticed that it's pretty consistent now. These people generally have nowhere to go. Where they're the exploited workers, they got nowhere to go. So that maybe they're on temporary work visas, but most of them they dangle the carrot in front of them and say, look, you can get citizenship in Australia, and then you'll be able to rip off the white people yourself. You won't even need our help to do it. So they go, wow, yeah, and I'll bring out my whole village and my fifth cousins and all that sort of thing. And so they're all desperate to get to a first world country. And but just looking at these legal cases now, here's a case I've got here where there's a bunch of folks took the their Indian migrant employer to court. Now I don't know how it came about, but they're getting free legal aid, not NGO involvement as far as I can tell, but free legal aid. So the Australian taxpayer is paying for these people who shouldn't even be here in the first place to sue someone, another migrant who again shouldn't even be here in the first place. So the taxpayer is paying for that legal case. The owner of the business who loses the case, and he has to pay his workers, hundreds of thousands of dollars in back pay and other compensation. So the business guy just hey, look, I'll just bankrupt the business, open up another one. Nothing you can do to me. If I pay that, I can't afford to make this business viable. And this kind of brings me back to the idea that there's an ever-growing section of the Western economy, Australia included, that is totally dependent on the ability to rip off and exploit migrant workers. Again, whether it's through packaging up accommodation and so on, giving them food. But there is the massive industry in that. So by paying someone 1/3 of the money that they should get paid, the business can be made viable. Now, if you've got, for example, 10 employees in your restaurant, chefs and wait staff and so on, and instead of a wage bill of, again, I'll go around numbers here, $100 a week, you're only having to pay $25 or $30 a week. That can be the difference between viability or none, or the ability to subsidise quite a high standard of living for the owner and so on. So this is what we've got now is a huge sector of the economy and a growing sector. All takeout food, nail painting salons, the list goes on. A lot of retail stores now where they're wholly dependent on being able to pay people a quarter or 1/3 of what the mandated rate is. Now, this would be considered an outrage. The government should be all over it, prosecuting the crap out of anyone who's doing this, but they don't, because if they actively and aggressively prosecute this, then effectively it's going to cut off a whole source of mass immigration. The mass immigration is to bring peasants in to work in these industries so they can be illegally exploited, and the government effectively indulges that behaviour because it causes and brings out mass migration. Now, in a market-driven economy, which we're fast moving away from, the globalists do not want a market-driven economy. They want market prices when they're profiting from it, but they run a million miles away from market prices when they're not profiting from it, such as market price increase in wages or something like that, or increase in other cost inputs. If it's price increases in real estate and they own shitloads of real estate, well, that's fine. That's market forces, but not if it's the other way around. So we're looking at the as we move further and further away from a market-driven economy, that we're moving into a point where more and more jobs are falling into the exploitation sphere. Now, you can say exploitation in terms of underpaying people from the mandated rate, which is a huge issue, but also exploitation in just general degradation of employment conditions. For example, I was I was in a grocery store, supermarket a little while ago, and there was a lady there just on like the checkout, and she was just about to go home and knock off her shift. But this was a bit surprising. It was, I don't know, 11 o'clock in the morning, something like that. So I said, you've been working all night or something, and just like it seemed an odd time to. And she said, no, she has to work 8 hours a day, but she's got 4 hours on, then she gets 4 hours off, and then 4 hours on again. That's the shifts that she's got. And if she wants a job, that's damn well what she'll do. So that sort of thing was impossible years ago. You got a straight out 8 hours, or you got the 4 hours, but the idea you could split someone's 8 hour shift in 4 hour blocks was unthinkable. Now, this is a major food chain of stores here doing this. And you also see the same thing with, say, pizza delivery and so on. You have to be on call. They don't have to tell you what your roster is in advance. They can call up 15 minutes before they need you, and then send you home again an hour later if they don't need you. Things like that. Now, technically, you could sort of take things like that to industrial courts and the like. But whereas there is masses of legal aid, billions and billions of dollars of legal aid available if you're a black or brown illegal immigrant trying to fight the forces of evil whiteness, there is an infinite amount of money available there. But if you're a worker just getting exploited and losing your basic employment conditions, as they gradually degrade and debased, or the government, or there's nobody who'll take any interest in prosecuting, and you're not rich enough to do it, then there's no money available. There's no one cares, no one knows, no one wants to know. So these are some of the issues that I think are the big issues of our time. Now, in Australia, there's a push by the government to talk about use of labour hire scams to supply workers in some of the mining industries and heavy engineering industries, that sort of thing, just grunt labourer workers. And though I don't doubt it, incidentally, but they're projecting that as being that's white people exploiting brown people, and that's an issue. Whitey, evil fascist Nazi, white exploiting brown people. But the real issue is the majority of exploitation doesn't come from white people exploiting brown. Not that it doesn't happen, by the way, it does. But the real issue is when black people come to the West, and then they're more than willing to exploit their fellow countrymen or women and exploit them in substantial ways. It's not like they're taking a dollar here or a dollar there, or getting them to work back 5 minutes. I think they're really exploiting them. And in their own country, where you've got a class tribal system, such as in India, that sort of exploitation is sort of how it works. That's just natural to them, and they want to bring that sort of class and tribal exploitation system here to the West. And you see it in Australia. You even see it in schools where the Brahmins have sort of established their own schools and their own social hierarchy in the schools, where the Brahmins are sort of in charge and they're informally running the school. And it's you go, why would you allow that sort of thing even to happen? But For some reason, the government wants to do nothing about that. But once it's about what white people who are fascists, then suddenly the government's got all amounts of energy and time and money to go chasing after that, but nothing to stop this tribal class and caste system from being transplanted from places like India and Africa into the West. Now, I'll add another. There was a I can't remember, I think he was Arabic. So I think he was Arabic. And he owned a takeout food store. And what he did, this is another scam that's widespread, by the way. He owned a takeout food store. I don't think he was doing that well. I'm doing all right, but it wasn't doing that well. But if he wanted to keep the payments up on his top of the range Beamer, then he had to exploit the workers. Now, he exploited in a couple of ways. He would get Chinese and peasant workers from China and India, and he would say, well, look, I'll let you work here for a month, and if I'm happy with your work, then I'll put you on the payroll and pay you, but you have to show me you're a good worker. Now, these people not understanding, not having sophistication either way to understand sort of how things are supposed to work. Oh, okay, all right then. And look, I'll give you a free sausage roll or hamburger or something, during the day. So he's giving them something like a drink and a cup of coffee and a small meal. So they were getting something. So, all right. So they'd go along and do it. And at the end of the month, he'd say, look, Chi Chong, look, I think you're okay, but you're just not quite there yet. I'd like to try you out for another month, and look, I probably will employ you at the end of that month, but look, I want to see a bit of an improvement. So that sort of thing. So he uses those sorts of carrot stick type approaches. So he effectively gets free labor. So he's not having to pay any of his workers. I mean, giving them a cup of coffee or something, but he's not having to pay any of his workers. And on top of that, when he does, assuming he does get them to work, he used to arbitrarily say, "Look, I'm not quite happy with the work, so I'm not going to, your work today was terrible. I'm not going to pay you for today." Just arbitrarily doing those sorts of things. And through that way, he was able to reduce the cost of his payroll by almost 80%. Now, it also meant, because he had no one reliable or dependable there, that he had to work long hours. He had to be there every day, and you could see that wore this guy down. He had a business not far away from where I lived at the time. So now he overexploited one guy just a bit too much, and the guy turned up and said, "No, look, I want to. You had me here for 3 months on various bullshit excuses. You're not going to pay me, so you have. I've come here to get my money, so I want to get paid." So it turned ugly, and the business owner tried to throw this guy out, physically grab him. They struggled, and the migrant guy, in true migrant fashion, pulled a knife, and they struggled again. The business owner got stabbed, and later ended up dying as a result of the injury. But this is again an indication that there are now tens of thousands of businesses all over Australia and all over the Western world that aren't viable. They couldn't exist without the exploitation, the huge, not just little bit, but the huge exploitation of workers in various ways, many ways, in fact. Now, what would the food industry, and I'll use that because that seems to be, as far as I can tell, the biggest employer of these people, what would the food industry, as in takeout food, restaurants and so on, what would that look like if it was subject to market forces? So let's say the wages have to be paid according to the mandated amount. If they had to be paid, then you would see just tens of thousands of businesses would have to close their doors overnight, and all these exploited workers would have to go back to India or China and that sort of thing. Maybe that's a good thing, but it's not something the Western governments want. The globalists certainly don't want that. So what would the food industry look like? Would it become automated? Would it be would simply the price go up, and the takeout food, or the restaurant business in particular, would only be available to the well-to-do, people that could afford a few $100 for a meal, that sort of thing. So would restaurant owners think, well, gee, I can't really make a whole lot of money out of this. I can't exploit the workers, so I can't keep up the payments on my top of the range Beamer or Merc or whatever. So I don't want to be in the restaurant business. I want to get into a different business. So, something that has much higher profits, drug dealing, for example. So would the economy fundamentally change when worker exploitation wasn't possible? The only reason we've got the mass immigration in a large part is to bring in these exploitable workers. And it brings in the villains and the goons and just the mafia from India and China who come in to open up businesses because it is profitable, because they can evade the taxes. But to do that, they have to exploit their fellow citizens under these scam labour hire things and so on. So I think there would be a huge change in the economy, but I think it's a change that we need. I think the continuation of this mass migration of exploitable workers and these skilled immigrant scams that are going, they're massive scams. I think that's creating a problem that we're just kicking the can down the road, and the proportion of the total economy, Western economies, that is now cordoned off from market forces, this the food industry and so on, at some point that's going to burst, and it's going to be ugly as the shit goes in all directions. But if it's dealt with sort of in a measured way now, then that can be avoided. I don't think there's the will amongst the globalist control governments to do anything about this, because they love the idea that all these exploitable workers are all black and brown, and that's a good thing as they see it, as a good just in itself. And they want that to continue. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.